Surah As-Ṣāffāt, the 37th chapter of the Quran, is a surah that pulses with the rhythm of faith, struggle, and ultimate victory. It is a Makkan revelation, revealed at a time when the Prophet Muhammad and his followers were facing severe opposition. In this context, the surah stands as a declaration: truth will prevail, falsehood will crumble, and the ranks of believers will triumph, just as they always have in the history of prophecy. The name As-Ṣāffāt refers to those who line up in ranks. Scholars explain that this points to the angels who stand in disciplined rows, glorifying and serving God without distraction. It also symbolizes the idea of unity and order among the faithful, who align themselves in worship and in purpose. The image of ranks immediately sets the tone. Faith is not just personal belief, but a disciplined collective commitment to the truth. The call to pure monotheism. From its opening verses, Surah As-Ṣāffāt confronts one of the central challenges of Makkan society: idolatry. The surah begins by describing the angels who are devoted entirely to God. They are pure servants, never claiming divinity, never wavering in obedience. This opening contrasts with the false claims of the idols worshipped by the Quraysh, idols that neither create nor sustain, but are worshipped only out of inherited custom. The Quran ridicules the idea that such powerless figures could be partners with God. Faith, it reminds us, begins with pure monotheism. There can be no compromise, no sharing of divine power. The triumph of faith starts with stripping away all illusions and recognizing God as the sole creator, sustainer, and judge. The reality of the afterlife. One of the recurring objections of the disbelievers in Makkah was their denial of the afterlife. They mocked the idea of resurrection, asking how decayed bones could ever be restored to life. Surah As-Ṣāffāt addresses this denial directly, painting vivid images of the Day of Judgment. The surah describes the contrast between the fate of believers and the fate of those who reject faith. The righteous will be in gardens of delight, safe from harm, enjoying peace, companionship, and the mercy of God. In contrast, those who mocked the truth will face blazing fire, chains, and humiliation. The imagery is striking because it presents not only the physical realities of the afterlife, but also the emotional dimension, regret, shame, and the collapse of false pride. The Quran emphasizes that these outcomes are not arbitrary. They are the natural consequences of choices made in life. Stories of the Prophets. Faith under trial. Perhaps the most powerful aspect of Surah As-Ṣāffāt is its recounting of prophetic stories. Each story is a miniature portrait of faith under pressure, and each ends with the triumph of truth over adversity. We hear of Noah, who was rejected and ridiculed, but who persevered until the flood vindicated his message. We read about Abraham, who challenged his people as idolatry and was willing to sacrifice even his beloved son for the sake of God as command. His story highlights the ultimate test of trust, placing love for God above every other attachment. The surah also recalls Moses and Aaron, who stood firm against Pharaoh, the greatest tyrant of their age. Then Jonah, who was swallowed by the great fish yet rescued by divine mercy. And Elias, Lot, and others, all of whom faced rejection, but ultimately were honored by God. These stories are not just history. They are reminders that the path of faith has always been marked by trials, but those trials lead to triumph. Each prophet serves as a witness that God's help is near, and that steadfastness leads to success. The defeat of arrogance. One theme that binds the surah together is the downfall of arrogance. The disbelievers of Makkah, like the tyrants of old, thought their power, wealth, or numbers would protect them. But the Quran reminds us that arrogance is a fragile shield. The mightiest nations of the past, whether the people of Noah, Pharaoh, or others, were swept away when they opposed the truth. The triumph of faith does not always come in the form of worldly victory. Sometimes it comes in survival, sometimes in moral clarity, sometimes in the endurance of belief despite all opposition. The surah reminds us that what appears as defeat in worldly terms can still be triumph in God, CS perspective, because faith is preserved and truth continues. Lessons for today. Surah As-Ṣāffāt is not just a message for the Quraysh of the 7th century. Its call echoes into our time. In a world where material success is often mistaken for ultimate success, the surah challenges us to redefine triumph. True triumph is not in wealth, power, or recognition, but in remaining firm in faith, even when it is unpopular or difficult. The stories of the prophets show us that doubt, rejection, and hardship are part of the journey of faith. They also show us that God's support is constant, even when unseen. Just as the angels stand in perfect ranks, so too are believers called to stand in unity, devotion, and purpose. Conclusion: the triumph of faith. Surah As-Ṣāffāt brings together angels, prophets, and ordinary believers in one grand vision of faith's ultimate victory. It shows us that faith may be tested, ridiculed, or opposed, but it cannot be destroyed. From Noah to Abraham, from Moses to Jonah, the record of history is clear. The triumph of faith is inevitable. The surah begins with ranks of angels standing in worship, and it ends with a reminder of God, sees supreme power, and the certain reality of the day of judgment. Between these 2 points lies the story of humanity's struggle between arrogance and humility, denial and belief. The lesson is timeless. Faith, when sincere and steadfast, always triumphs, not because of human strength, but because it aligns with the eternal truth of God.